Good evening, or to everyone. It's evening here, but welcome, my dear students of Canon Law 1 of MST. This is your third tape or third recording. We start on page 9 of your notes, and then there towards the third paragraph, we have the section capital letter C. Distinction between letter and spirit is helpful, not destructive, complementary, not exclusive. From the nature and function or goal of church law from Father George V. Lobo, S.J., from his book Guide to Christian Living. Although the church is a community of love, the Spirit Himself being her primary inward principle of guidance, her character as a human society calls for a certain amount of order, which positive law seeks to obtain. The New Testament itself validates the existence of law in the church when, number one, it witnesses to stable ministries in the church. Number two, it speaks of the power to bind and to loose. It describes the regulation of Christian life in apostolic communities. What Father Lobo is trying to say here is that although the Spirit is very, very important in the interpretation of the law, we also need the letter which gives some discipline or order. That is why the title of capital letter C is the distinction between letter and spirit is helpful, not destructive, complementary, not exclusive. The problem, of course, is most of the time people interpret the law only according to the letter, but not the spirit. The letter must be supported by the spirit, and the spirit must be a priority. So citing the next paragraph there, Pius XII, there should be no opposition between the charismatic or the spirit of the law and the juridical letter of the law, elements in the church. Pope Pius XII declared that it is a calamitous error which invents an imaginary church, a society nurtured and shaped by charity, with which it disparagingly contrasts another society which it calls juridical. That's from the encyclical Mystici Corporis of Pope Pius XII. The next paragraph is from Pope Paul VI, expressing the same thing. Pope Paul VI has expressed the need for law in the church very strongly. A community without law, far from being or even being able to be in this world, the community of charity, has never been and will never be anything else than a community of the arbitrary. This is from Allocution Acta Apostolica Sedis. Nevertheless, the law is not meant for the law's sake, but is at the service of truth, justice, patience, and charity. The next paragraph. Hence, it should be clear that law has only a subsidiary role in the church. Subsidiary means it assists. It's not the ultimate thing. The Christian has been freed from living under the economy of the law. The economy means this is the plan of the law or the outline of the law. He needs the external formulation of the moral law and canon law for that matter, only inasmuch as he is not yet able by himself to discern the law of God imprinted in his heart. That's from St. Paul. Likewise, he needs the guidance of human law like canon law, only inasmuch as human weakness prevents him from discerning spontaneously the needs of common life in the ecclesiastical community. Ultimately, when there is a conflict between letter and spirit, the latter should always be upheld when possible. Moreover, as Pope Francis stated which we also mentioned already earlier. If laws do not lead God to Jesus, they are obsolete. Again, Pope Francis, finally, the last paragraph. At Pope Francis's address at the end of the Synod of the Family, on 24 October 2015, he remarked, "The Synod experience also made us better realize that the true defenders of doctrine are not those who uphold its letter, but its spirit, not ideas, but people, not formulae, but the gratuitousness of God's love and forgiveness." You see the contrast there of the letter and the spirit, the idea and the people, the formula and God's love. This is in no way to detract from the importance of formulas. They are necessary, or laws for that matter, the letter of the law are necessary, or from the importance of laws and divine commandments, but rather to exalt the greatness of the true God, who does not treat us according to our merits or even according to our works, but solely according to the boundless generosity of His mercy. That's from Romans and Psalms and Luke. We are now on page 10. It does have to do with overcoming the recurring temptations of the older brother. That's the parable of the prodigal son. And the jealous laborers, the parable of the vineyard workers. Indeed, it means upholding all the more the laws and commandments which were made for men, and not vice versa. Mark chapter 2, verse 27. The church's first duty is not to hand down condemnation or anathemas, but to proclaim God's mercy, to call to conversion, and to lead all men and women to salvation in the Lord. Again, you have the phrase there, salvation, which is the main goal of canon law, salus animarum in Latin. Let's go now to section D, that's capital letter D. Title is Jesus Christ, Absolute Model in Observing the Letter of the Law from its Spirit. Canon law is called ecclesiastical law inasmuch as it is ultimately founded in the mind and heart of Jesus Christ. Without this spirit coming from Jesus, no canon merits to be called ecclesiastical. Thus, in interpreting a canon, before taking recourse to its primary sources in the documents of Vatican II, the mind of Christ must be sought first in the scriptures and even in prayer. See, when I was explaining the outline of how to make a reflection paper in canon law, it's always important that we start with what does the Bible say? What is the mind of Jesus regarding this particular matter that the law is talking about? And then also from Vatican II, always, however, going back to the mind of Jesus Christ, to the mind of God found in the Bible. All right, let's continue. Number 1, a common misunderstanding. Opinions persist that to be a genuine canon lawyer, one must be faithful to the rules. Unfortunately, this attitude tended towards rigid and literal observance of the letter of the law, with almost utter disregard to its spirit. These are described as rigid sticklers to the law, like some conservative groups in the church are known for. If this is the case, it seems that Jesus Christ himself may not qualify as true canon lawyer, inasmuch as Jesus primarily lived the spirit of the law. Nevertheless, in this course, we will always go back to Jesus Christ as not only the originator of ecclesiastical law, but most especially as the original canon lawyer. A canon lawyer who does not center his heart on Christ has no business being a church lawyer at all. That's an important statement. So let us look at the instances when how Jesus would interpret the law from the point of view of spirit and not its letter. In Canon 22:34, Jesus said, another in the Bible, the Gospel of St. Luke 23-34, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, they do not know what they are doing." This quote will not be easily applied in canon law. Just look at the zero tolerance adopted by U.S. bishops for the erring priests, sexual abusers, despite objections from the Vatican. The tedious process of laicization from the clerical estate is another area where quick forgiveness is hardly practiced. Letter B. In St. John chapter 13, verses 34-35, "I give you a new commandment, love one another. Such as my love has been for you, so must you love your love for each other. This is how all will know you for my disciples, your love for one another." If the order in any Christian community like the church is love for one another, a law devoid of Christian love, that is, the forgiving and self-emptying love that we experience from Christ, confer parable of the prodigal son, does not merit to be part of canon law or any ecclesiastical law. Finally, small letter C, John 21, verse 15. When they had eaten their meal, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." At which Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." So even those who are entrusted with keeping order in the church, that is, those who are responsible in the observance of church laws, are required to have a deep love for Christ to be able to assume such responsibility. It's important that a canon lawyer or an interpreter of the law has this sense of love for Jesus, the way Jesus has been asking Peter when he was appointed as the first pope. This would apply to all Christian officials, clerics, lay leaders, and teachers. We move now to page 11. Number 2, Jesus practices what he preaches. Love must underscore every law, otherwise it does not apply. We saw that before earlier when Jesus was saying, "There's only one great commandment I'm leaving you, the commandment of love, love of God, love of neighbor." And he said, all your other laws must be based on this, the man-made laws. Otherwise, they are not good laws, or otherwise they should not apply, or you may or may not follow them. They're not based on this great commandment of love. So, as I've said there in number 2, Jesus practices what he preaches. Love must underscore every law, otherwise it does not apply. So let's go to first small letter A in Matthew chapter 12, verses 1-8. Mercy and not sacrifice. Once on the Sabbath, Jesus walked through the standing grain. His disciples felt hungry, so they began to pull off the heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees espied this, they protested, "See here, your disciples are doing what is not permitted on the Sabbath." He replied, "Have you not read what David did when he and his men were hungry, and how he entered God's house and ate the holy bread, a thing forbidden to him and his men, or anyone other than priests? Have you not read in the law how the priests on temple duty can break the Sabbath rest without incurring guilt? I assure you, there is something greater than the temple here. If you understood the meaning of the text, 'It is mercy I desire and not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned these innocent men." Another example, small letter B, in Luke chapter 6, verses 6-10. To do good is lawful. On another Sabbath, he came to teach in the synagogue, where there was a man whose right hand was withered. The scribes and Pharisees were on the watch to see if he would perform a cure on the Sabbath, so that they could find charge against him. He knew their thoughts, however, and said to the man whose hand was withered, "Get up and stand here in front." The man rose and remained standing. Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or evil, to preserve life or destroy it?" He looked around at them all and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." The man did so, and his hand was perfectly restored. In these first two instances, you see clearly that Jesus practices what he preaches. Any law that is not based on love may not be followed, or it does not apply. Letter A, we have the law there of not working on Sabbath, or the law also of not stealing what is not yours. But on Sabbath, because Jesus got hungry together with the apostles, the disciples, they violated the rule of not working. They started picking grains to feed themselves. And when they were accused by the Pharisees, he read the mind of the Pharisees. They were also accusing Jesus as taking something which did not belong to him. And so he cited David when he was at war, and he and the soldiers got hungry. They entered the tabernacle and raided it from all the food that was offered, which was meant to be eaten only by the priests. Violation of two things here: Sabbath and do not steal, because love is more important. In letter B, that's the same violation of Sabbath, so that he can cure. Let's look now at small letter C, Matthew 12, verses 10 to 12. Human being more precious than the law itself. A man with a shriveled hand happened to be there, and they put this question to Jesus, hoping to bring an accusation against him. Is it lawful to work a cure on a Sabbath? He said in response, suppose one of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath. Will he not take hold of it and pull it out? Well, think how much more precious a human being is than a sheep. Clearly, good deeds may be performed on the Sabbath. Then to the man he said, stretch out your hand. He did so. It was perfectly restored. It became as sound as the other. Again, in this story, Jesus violating the law of Sabbath because the law of love is more important than any human law. This contradicts the love. Love, which is for Francis, that concrete expressed as mercy and forgiveness. He needed to kill this person who has been sick. And he did it even if it were Sabbath, because that is more important than observing the Sabbath law. Small letter D now. Mark 5, verses 5 to 13. Mark 7, verses 5 to 13. Divine law of love higher than human laws or traditions. The Pharisees and the scribes questioned him, why do your disciples not follow the tradition of our ancestors, but instead take food without purifying their hands? You know, traditions are kind of laws as well. He said to them, how accurately Isaiah prophesied about you hypocrites when he wrote, these people pay me lip service, but their heart is far from me. Empty is the reverence they do me, because they teach as dogmas mere human precepts. You disregard God's commandment and cling to what is human tradition. He went on to say, you have made a fine art of setting aside God's commandment in the interest of keeping your traditions. For example, Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and in another place, whoever curses father or mother shall be put to death. Yet you declare, if a person says to his father or mother, any support you might have had from me is korban, that is dedicated to God, you allow him to do nothing more for his father or mother. That is why you nullify God's work in favor of traditions you have handed on. And you have many other such practices besides. regarding this tradition of korban. Korban, Hebrew, is something dedicated to God. We have some modern equivalents to that, like when a person becomes a religious, makes a vow of poverty, chastity, obedience. Some of the rigid rules of these congregations will not allow this man or woman or brother who had been consecrated, or sister, to do anything more for the parents or for the family. That is not what the law says. Jesus said, honor your father and your mother. Even if you have become a priest or a nun or a brother, lay sister, you still are obliged to serve your parents, to take care of them in their old age, to look at their needs, because that is the divine law. The human law tradition is when you have had your religious vows, you have nothing more to do with your parents. That is wrong. Go back to the mind of Jesus. Even if you are vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, every consecrated or vowed man and woman are not dispensed from this commandment of love to honor your father and your mother. That is what Jesus was saying here in Mark 7, 5-13. A very good example of what Jesus is saying, that love must underscore every law you have, every tradition you have. If there is no love in that law or tradition, it should not apply. You can violate it too. But of course, see to it you're not caught, because otherwise you're penalized. Violation of human laws, or even devoid of love, you can be penalized. Small letter E, Luke 18, verses 10-14. Observing the letter of the law is useless if devoid of the true spirit of love. We've said that time and time again. So Jesus spoke this parable. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, with head unbowed, prayed in this fashion: I give thanks to God that I am not like the rest of men, grasping, crooked, adulterous, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I pay tithes on all I possess. The other man, however, kept his distance, not even daring to raise his eyes to heaven. All he did was beat his breast and say, "O God, be merciful to me, a sinner." Believe me, this man went home from the temple justified, and the other did not. He is one of my favorite example, wherein observing the letter does not really save if it is devoid of love. Just look at this Pharisee. Let's go back again to this story. Two people went to the temple to pray. The first one was a Pharisee, who was like me, a priest, educated, etc. He went straight to the front of the altar and said, "Lord, I thank you because I'm not like the rest of men. I'm not grasping, I'm not crooked, I'm not adulterous." And then he saw the tax collector at the back. Unlike him, he says, I even fast twice a week. I pay my tithes and all I possess. In other words, he obeyed all the 10 commandments and all the rules and regulations of the Jews given by Moses. But there was something lacking in him. There was no love in his heart. When he saw the sinner at the back saying, "Unlike him, Lord, he's a sinner. He is grasping, crooked, adulterous, etc. He does not fast, he doesn't pay tithes, etc." When the tax collector heard that, did he answer back at the Pharisee? No. He bowed his head, beat his chest, and said, "Lord, it is true what he said. I am a sinner. And have mercy on me." And of course, the shocking thing is when Jesus asked the apostles, who of the two, if they die right now, will go to heaven because he is justified? They cannot answer. Is it the one who followed all the rules and regulations, but there was no love on his heart? But the violator, but who was humble. Humility is also a sign of love. When you're humble before the Lord, that means you love the Lord. And of course, Jesus said, the one who showed humility is justified. The one who was so proud and arrogant, even if he followed all the rules and regulations, is condemned. That is the end of this third lecture. Please, if you have time now, we continue right away with the fourth lecture. So goodbye for a while, and continue with the fourth lecture. God bless you.